Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number, it's going to get weird saying this, 101. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this special episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. You might be asking, why is it special? Just because we get a chance to talk with you guys. It is an amazing privilege. It is so fun, as always, to be able to discuss all of these things with all of you guys. And last week, we celebrated episode number 100, and I released a segment, but also a post on my community tab asking for questions. So guys, if you have any questions that you want to ask for our Ask Me Anything segment, which I'm going to try to get done by next week's episode, but if not the one after, then let me know. Feel free to let me know and leave a comment, send an email. I'd find my Instagram. Nobody's really on there, but that's okay. But yeah, just send me a question and I'll answer it on the AMA as long as it's appropriate and as long as you don't send 600 questions. So there is that. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be talking about a lot of interesting things today, wrapping up Gen V Season 2 and talking about a canceled Star Wars movie about Ben Solo. So that'll be interesting. But guys, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. Make sure to give the video a like and leave a comment down below. And check us out on the audio-only platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Overcast. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel by the end of the year. I think we can get there, guys. As of the recording of this podcast, I think we're at 1913. So getting close to the 2000s. It's really exciting, guys. It's really, really exciting. Thank you all so much for all the support and just making this community what it is. It's been awesome. So guys, without any further ado, let's get into today's topics. Alrighty, guys. The Access Blockbusters Pod and the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel has never been afraid to say things that most people disagree with. Now, I'm not a contrarian for the sake of contrarian. Is that a word? Contrarianness? But I do think that we should all respect each other's opinions, and there are just ways in which different movies and different shows hit us, and there are just thoughts that we have that not a lot of people agree with. I unabashedly love Eternals. I know not a lot of people do. That's fine. I think Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness are fine. I think they're fine. Most people hate them. That's okay. I think they're fine. I've never been afraid to just say what's on my mind because I think it's all in the sake of discussion and sharing our own thoughts and having positive and constructive discourse. So the topic of today's segment here is something that I don't know, frankly, if a lot of people will agree with or not. Maybe a lot of people will, and I'll be surprised, but I have a feeling that there will be a decent split. But my thesis for today's segment here is that I believe the Star Wars universe, and we'll talk about what that means, the Star Wars universe is vastly more interesting than any of the on-screen products that we've seen. So, just for some background on myself, I grew up on Star Wars. Star Wars, I was shown one of the first Star Wars movies when I was 5 years old, I think. So, from a very young age, I grew up on Star Wars. I was watching the prequel movies when they were coming out. I was a big fan of the Star Wars movies. I actually, though, more than anything else, grew up on the Clone Wars. Because I wasn't alive when the original trilogy came out. But And I was sort of keeping up, but I was much too young to really understand what was going on with the prequel trilogy when that was coming up. But I was watching them, I think, as I was growing up at a very young age. But what I really was cognizant of, and what I really remember growing up with was Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The animated movies and the animated show, to me, are the bedrock and the foundation of my Star Wars fandom. And yes, taking a look back, the Star Wars: The Clone Wars movie is probably not great, even though we are getting Rhoda the Hutt back in The Mandalorian and Grogu for some reason. But anyways, the Star Wars: The Clone Wars movie is probably not great. It's not beloved by many people. The show, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, has a lot of fans, myself included. I love Star Wars: The Clone Wars still. I did a rewatch of it, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. It's still amazing. Holds up amazingly well. But I grew up on Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And as the movies have been coming out, right, I was super excited when The Force Awakens came out. I was very excited when The Last Jedi came out. I'm one of the people who really likes The Last Jedi. Rise of Skywalker, again, I thought it was okay at the time. And as I've watched it more over the past few years, at least 2 or 3 times since then, it's okay. It's all right, in my opinion. And you can go check out a bunch of videos that I've done on The Rise of Skywalker. But all that being said, I got to thinking about what the Star Wars universe, what Star Wars represents to me. And I was thinking the other day, why is it that I love Star Wars? And to be honest with you, we've done our rankings of Star Wars and we've done tier lists and things like that. Honestly, the on-screen products of Star Wars that I want to sit down and watch as stories today are not as many as I thought. I love Andor. I really love Rogue One. I like the original trilogy, although again, it's hard not to watch the original trilogy for me as through the lens of somebody who's watching it 40 or 50 years later after they came out, because they're older movies, and I love The Empire Strikes Back, and I like most of Return of the Jedi, and I think A New Hope is classic, right? But it's not; those aren't the movies that I would sit down and watch on a given day, because I don't have that inherent nostalgia for it. I didn't grow up watching those movies. I actually grew up watching the prequels and the Clone Wars, and I obviously did watch the original trilogy as well, but obviously when I was younger, the prequels were the newer thing. And yes, as I rewatched the prequels, Attack of the Clones and The Phantom Menace, I don't think those movies are super great. That's just my opinion. I know some people really like them. That's great. And same thing goes with Revenge of the Sith. I like Revenge of the Sith much more than the other two. I think it's okay. Force Awakens, to me, when I rewatched it a few years ago, not as good as I remember it being. Last Jedi, I still like a decent bit, and Rise of Skywalker is, it's okay. And since then, the Disney Plus era of Star Wars has only solidified this. I really like Andor. It's great. I like bits and pieces of Obi-Wan. I think Ahsoka as a whole was kind of disappointing. Acolyte, not great. But I really like Skeleton Crew. And yet, I sit here today, in 2025, almost 2026, and I still consider myself such a big fan of Star Wars. Why is that? I just ask myself, why is that? Because any other franchise, right? Any other franchise where you take a look at the canon as a whole and the catalogs, and you don't like or you don't love maybe 50% of the projects that have come out, that's not a good ratio, right? I mean, the MCU has been hit or miss lately, but the Infinity Saga, I loved almost every single one of those movies. It was incredible what they were able to do. Star Wars is not the same to me. I don't have inherent love for the movies or the shows of Star Wars in the same way that I do for the MCU, like Endgame and Infinity War. It's just different times when I grew up, when I was watching those movies. But to me, what I have such fondness for Star Wars were hanging out with my friends when I was younger and having pretend lightsaber fights. Being able to walk around in Disneyland at Galaxy's Edge and see the Millennium Falcon. Being able to watch the Clone Wars and play the video games and play Lego Star Wars, which it's one of my favorite games of all time. The original, I think the Complete Saga or whatever it was called. And I've played the Skywalker Saga as well. Just some of my favorite memories are playing those games. It's the universe. What makes the Acolyte any bit interesting to me, and again, I don't hate the Acolyte, but it's not my favorite thing. But what makes the Acolyte any bit interesting to me is the lore and the mythology. I love lightsabers. I love the Force. That's what, to me, that's the superpower of Star Wars. That is the superpower of what George Lucas built. Because you can take the prequel trilogy, a series of films that I don't think I love in terms of quality, but you can spin out an entire mythology to turn it into 7 seasons of an amazing, wonderful show that fleshes out the universe in the Clone Wars and shows you Anakin Skywalker and has this intricate mythology of the Sith and Darth Bane and Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious and Darth Vader. It's all right there. I think that, to me, the Star Wars universe, the reason that Star Wars, to me, my love for Star Wars will never die, because look, I mean, my love for the MCU will never die, but my love for the MCU is intrinsically tied, yes, to the characters, but really to the stories that they're telling within those within the MCU, and that's a conversation for another day. I really do think a lot of great things have come out of Phase 4 and Phase 5 and now Phase 6, like Fantastic Four, like WandaVision, a lot of great things have come out of it, Shang-Chi, Spider-Man No Way Home. It's not like the MCU is completely nosedived for me, but I think that it is fair to say that the MCU, my love for the MCU, is contingent on the quality of the products that they're giving out. I love the MCU, but it's not like I love the universe of the MCU, if that makes sense. I love the characters that inhabit it. I love the stories that we've been able to see on screen. But for Star Wars, it doesn't really matter who the characters are, in a sense. I loved Skeleton Crew, regardless of who the characters were, probably because I didn't know who the characters were, because it just took the universe of Star Wars and made something really fun. And I think, to me, part of the genius of Star Wars, of George Lucas, is creating this universe, this world, that transcends the stories that are actually in it. Some of you guys, by the way, are yelling and screaming at me because you guys have actual, real, more, I guess stronger, not real, because I have real attachment for the movies and the TV shows as well. But you guys have stronger attachments to those TV shows and movies. And that's great. That's awesome. I took a step back and I thought, I actually don't know how many of the projects that I actually like out of Star Wars, but I have such a love for this universe that I thought it's so interesting and fascinating. I think Star Wars is one of the only properties that has been able to do this, to just create a world where it's not intrinsically tied to a specific character. It's not like Harry Potter and Hogwarts. I love the wizarding world as a concept. it is still pretty intrinsically tied to Harry Potter, although I did like some of the Fantastic Beasts movies. I haven't seen enough of Star Trek to know how I feel about that. I know that there have been a lot of spin-offs and things like that. But Star Wars, again, to me, it's just, you just take this world and you just run with it. And yeah, some of the projects aren't going to be great, but you know what? At the end of the day, a lightsaber is still a lightsaber, and the Force is still the Force. And this universe, this galaxy, it's amazing. So I just wanted to talk about that because I'm very curious to see, does anyone else agree with me? I think that the universe that Star Wars has created is far more interesting and far more impactful than the products that are actually coming out on screen. Guys, what do you think about this? Am I completely crazy? I might be. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, one of the big principles that I preach on this channel and in life, just not just YouTube, but in life in general, context is key. Context is key to understanding the full picture of what's going on, and taking things in a vacuum is rarely a good idea because there are always nuances and there are always things that are going on behind the scenes to lead to these moments. So, context is going to be very important as we even talk about this story at all. The fact that Gwyneth Paltrow said something about Marvel, that's not really a story in itself, except for one thing, and a couple theories that I have coming out of it. So that's why we're talking about this story, that Gwyneth Paltrow seems to have hinted at an MCU return. So apparently, right, according to some reports, that she was in, I think she was at Brown, I want to say, the university, and she was doing some interviews, and I guess she was asked about her future, or her future projects in general. So she was not asked about Marvel specifically. But to answer that question, this is what she had to say. Very simple. She said, quote, "I might be in another Marvel movie." Again, that's the quote. That's the last quote. Last time we saw her, by the way, was in Avengers Endgame. She is alive. The character is alive in the MCU, and so is her daughter, Morgan Stark. So the character is there. But the last time we saw her was in Avengers Endgame, and she was referenced in Spider-Man Far From Home very briefly by Happy Hogan. But the character is still very much within the MCU. So, again, that single quote in itself, not really a headliner, except for the context surrounding it. Gwyneth Paltrow, if you've been following movie news for a while now, you'll know that Gwyneth Paltrow, when she says something about Marvel, she's almost entirely completely honest, because oftentimes she has no idea what Marvel project she's even in. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I don't blame her, right? If you're not super locked in, like if you're not Tom Holland or Zendaya or, I don't know, Paul Rudd or whoever, super ingrained in the MCU, then yeah, it's hard to know. And especially if you're one of those characters that pops in and out of different movies, then of course it's hard to tell exactly what movie you're in. I think at one point she was like, was I in Spider-Man? Of course she was. She was in Spider-Man Homecoming. But if you are just filming scenes here and there, you filmed a quick scene for Spider-Man Homecoming and then you're in Infinity War, it's like, how would you know? That totally makes sense. How would you know? So Gwyneth Paltrow, it's almost been funny every single time she talks about the MCU because she's like, I don't know what I'm in. I have no idea what I was in. And I think at one point post-Endgame, she was like, yeah, I mean, sure, if there's another thing, but no, I'm pretty much done, right? A lot of actors post-Endgame said very similar things. Actually, Robert Downey Jr. said very similar things. So that is why when she says, I might be in another Marvel movie, I take that pretty seriously. I think Gwyneth Paltrow is one of those actors and actresses who, generally speaking, when she says something about Marvel, she's not trying to hide anything because she's just saying what she is in. And I don't know if Marvel's PR loves that, but that's been my impression based on what we've heard from her over the past few years. So that's one thing, right? That is one thing to consider, is that I would give it extra weight. I would give it a little bit extra weight if she says she's going to be in another Marvel movie. But here's the other big kicker, right? I mentioned that I have a couple theories, or maybe one big theory, as to why I really put weight into this. When she says this, right, let's just say, let's look ahead to the Marvel slate, even all the unannounced release dates and just movies that are floating around without release dates thus far. Let's look ahead and just kind of see, where could she possibly be showing up? Well, Spider-Man Brand New Day, maybe. Maybe Happy's in the movie. Maybe, I don't know, maybe she has some connection with Peter Parker. Doubtful. Really doubtful, honestly. I think this is going to be a very disconnected Spider-Man movie from the rest of that Tony Stark legacy, rather. Not from the MCU, right? Because Punisher and Hulk. But from the Tony Stark side of things. So I don't think she's going to show up in there. Gonna skip the next two films. But, I mean, Doctor Strange, right? Doctor Strange 2, Shang-Chi 2, Black Panther 3, X-Men. Do we see Pepper Potts showing up in any of those movies? I don't think so. But I would say, from a writing perspective, not even Secret Wars. Secret Wars, I don't even know what's going to happen with that movie. I would be shocked, honestly, if she's in it or has a significant role in it. But I have to say, if I were a writer, and now we're entering pure speculation, but I do think, paired with her comments saying that she might be appearing in another MCU movie or another Marvel movie, this makes, I think, too much sense. She has to appear in Avengers Doomsday as Pepper Potts, because you're bringing back, and granted, we don't know what the rationale is for bringing back Robert Downey Jr., other than obviously money and other than, bringing a familiar face to the MCU and iconic and all that kind of stuff. But story-wise, we don't know yet, as of the recording of this segment, why Robert Downey Jr. had to be Doctor Doom. Is it a variant thing? Is Doctor Doom in that universe a variant of Tony Stark? Is it a face-swapping thing? Is it him trying to capture the hearts of people so that they recognize him as Iron Man and so that he can manipulate them? Maybe. But if they are going to use the fact that it is Tony Stark's face on Doctor Doom, which the Russo brothers have indicated there is a good reason why this is happening, it is just a cataclysmically enormous missed opportunity if you do not have a scene with this version of Doctor Doom and with Pepper Potts. Because I just think the emotional weight of the person that Tony Stark loved the most in the world, Pepper Potts, and even Morgan Stark, if there's a grown-up Morgan Stark in the universe now, maybe Catherine Langford comes back to play that role. It would be such a big missed opportunity if Doctor Doom does not come face-to-face with Pepper Potts, because that is one of the easiest and I think most significant ways you can ground this story in stakes, right? The idea that the biggest threat to the multiverse is somebody that people around the Avengers are so hesitant to fight because he looks like their greatest hero. It is, I think, Pepper Potts is the easiest way, the easiest character to drive that message home. Do I think that Doctor Doom needs to kill her or needs to kill Morgan? No. I mean, he very well might, and that might be even more devastating. But no, I even a face-to-face scene between the two of them, I think is going to carry it's going to carry all the baggage of 12 or 13 years or however many years that Gwyneth Paltrow was in the MCU. I don't remember, like 10, 11, 12, 13 years. It's going to carry all of that weight and all of that into that scene, and I think the audience is going to feel it. So that's my thought on that, is that if Gwyneth Paltrow is saying that she's going to come back in a Marvel movie, I would tend to believe her. And wouldn't you know it, I think that it just makes too much sense for her to appear in Avengers Doomsday. So I would be shocked, honestly. She's worked with the Russos, she worked with them on Infinity War, she worked with them on Endgame. I think that she's going to be coming back. Guys, what do you think? Do you think Pepper Potts has any kind of role in an upcoming MCU movie? And which one do you think it is? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, we are going to break a cardinal rule of the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel and podcast. Not really. We've done it before. But usually on the Access Blockbusters pod, I don't talk about set photos. The reason being, because set photos could mean a whole lot of anything that is not related at all to what we see physically with our eyes. And even if what we see physically with our eyes tells us something, oftentimes that something is way out of context with whatever's going on in the movie. So again, I know that set photos are coming out. I generally catch that news articles are saying set photo shows this and set photo shows that. And it is what it is. I just don't usually like to cover them on the channel because I think it's just a way for us to look foolish, honestly, when the movie actually comes out. Also, the movie's gonna come out, and it's fine. We'll see what those things actually mean when the movie comes out. That being said, there are a couple exceptions here, and there's a reason that I wanted to talk about really the set photos here, but not the set photos in themselves that we're going to discuss right now, but more what they mean for the movie. Because we've done a recent video where we talked about Clayface and set photos that are kind of confusing about what universe Clayface takes place. And again, with all the caveats of it could be different in the movie, it could mean something completely different, it could be set design and whatnot. So that's why we talked about it there, really as a springboard to conversation. And that's what I want to do today. Because recently, over the last week, we have seen set photos of Spider-Man Brand New Day, which Spider-Man Brand New Day I admire because they are using real sets and real locations for the most part. That being said, they are also exposing themselves to a lot of potential leaks, which is fine. It is what it is. Again, if you want to pay attention to them, you can. If you don't, like me, although I kind of happen to see them because I'm looking for stories and I'm following news sites and things like that, then you will, but it's fine. But these said photos have officially confirmed that Mark Ruffalo is going to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, you might be saying, wait a second, didn't we already talk about this? Wasn't this already confirmed by the major trades a while ago? Yes, it was, and we talked about it, right? That was a whole main topic of one of our podcast episodes a few weeks ago. Mark Ruffalo and then also Scorpion, Michael Mando, being confirmed for Spider-Man Brand New Day. So it's not like we didn't have high suspicions that this was going to happen. We basically knew that this was going to happen. I really, though, want to return to this conversation because I think it's a fascinating one. We also saw set photos of Sadie Sink, by the way, but again, it's like who she's going to be playing. It's fine if she plays a variant of Peter Parker, or if she plays Peter Parker's daughter, or if she plays Gwen. It doesn't matter. It's fine. It is what it is. There have been suspicions based on what she's wearing and all that. It's just, it is what it is. I'm not in that game. If you want to check out other YouTube channels that talk about and speculate on which character she's going to be based on set photos and what boots she's wearing, you can check those out. I've seen plenty of them. And we've brought up this question before. I want to return to this question because I think it's a fascinating one of what is the point of having Hulk in this movie? Granted, we don't know what his role is at all. We don't know what the story is at all, although we're getting some hints here and there based on set photos and based on what Tom Holland has been saying and things like that. But we don't know what this movie is about. The point I'm trying to make, though, is I don't know in a vacuum if I would have wanted Hulk to be in this movie. And frankly, given everything that we've heard so far about Spider-Man Brand New Day being a grounded kind of MCU movie and whatnot, seeing Mark Ruffalo solidifies this because honestly, right, everything about Spider-Man Brand New Day thus far, except for Hulk, has led to a pretty clear, consistent picture. Punisher being in the movie, Spider-Man post No Way Home, and then Sadie Sink's character could be anything, but again, Spider-Man post No Way Home, Punisher, a lot of the villains, a prison sequence or something like that, Scorpion. All these things lead to a pretty clear picture that, yeah, this Spider-Man movie is going to be street level, ground level, right? It's going to be gritty. It's going to be grounded. Punisher, just Punisher alone would indicate that this is going to be a darker version of Spider-Man. Not that Spider-Man needs to be Punisher level dark, but just that it's going to have those elements. And I'm not saying that Hulk inherently, right, is not going to make this movie dark. You can have movies that are pretty dark with fantastical elements. But let's be honest, right? Having a giant green monster in the city can be horrifying, right? But I feel like with the way that the MCU has gone over the past few years, with the Hulk character especially, this feels like a really odd way to transition him back to the Rage Monster Hulk, because the Hulk that has been in the past few projects with Endgame and with She-Hulk, and even in Shang-Chi a little bit, doesn't really fit the picture. It's like there's one thing that's wrong about this. You know the meme with the dragon heads, and there's three of them that look scary, and then there's one that looks kind of less intimidating, I should say. But it feels like that almost. That the version of Hulk that that's in continuity with the MCU. It would feel weird if we suddenly return to the Avengers level of Hulk. And granted, I would like to see that. I would like to see that Hulk that we saw fight Thanos in Infinity War, right? Somehow, I would like to see, honestly, in this version, this iteration in Spider-Man Brand New Day, I would like to see the Hulk that we saw controlled by Wanda. That version of the Hulk that fought the Hulkbuster, that is the kind of Hulk that I think that would fit any street level kind of story. The question is how and why? I keep returning to this, right? And we're not going to know. There might be a character in Spider-Man Brand New Day that is fitting that paradigm that Wanda had in Age of Ultron, where she's controlling Hulk. But really, I look at these set photos, and it's hard to glean that much about it, to be honest with you, about what Hulk's role is. But I just keep coming back to the question of what is he doing in this movie? That is, to me, the ultimate fascination with Spider-Man Brand New Day. Not whether Tobey Maguire is going to show up, not whether Venom is going to show up, not whether Sadie Sink is playing a version, nothing like that. To me, the biggest fascination of all is perhaps the biggest certainty now, because we have confirmation that Mark Ruffalo is on set and he is filming stuff for Spider-Man Brand New Day, and yet I don't know why. I don't know what this character is going to be. It's not a good or a bad thing, guys. I honestly, I would be really excited and interested to see what role Hulk has to play. I also would love to see him in Avengers Doomsday, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if Tom Holland's going to be in Avengers Doomsday, but I'm so fascinated with the idea that Hulk is going to be in this movie, and I have no idea what his role could possibly be. So guys, what do you think about this? What role could Hulk be playing in Spider-Man Brand New Day? We have set photos now that show that he's in the movie, because before it was just Variety articles saying, yep, they're in the movie. And honestly, it was a similar thing with when Alfred Molina was confirmed for Spider-Man No Way Home, and then we heard nothing about it because they were filming on sound stages for the most part. And then we got a first trailer and he was there. So, it's a similar thing. It's sort of that it's making it all tangible now that we actually know that he is on set filming scenes for this movie. And we'll have to see. First trailer comes out probably, I want to say December, maybe January. And yeah, I don't know. We'll have to find out what this movie is actually about. Guys, what do you think about this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, we are here to talk about everybody's favorite MCU topic these days. Is Elizabeth Olsen coming back as Wanda Maximoff / Scarlet Witch in the MCU? And, it's funny because at some point last year or earlier on this year, we were doing segments on this almost every month. Elizabeth Olsen giving quotes and talking about, when I want to come back to the MCU, maybe, maybe not. And, the tone was lukewarm, right? The tone was lukewarm for a while, especially after Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which was, I think, I wouldn't say a troubled production, but it was a messy production based on everything that we know. And it doesn't look like Elizabeth Olsen had the best time making that movie, although, again, she's never said a terrible word about it, but I think she's admitted to there being a lot of different moving parts and script changes and director changes and writer changes and things like that. It's understandable, right? But as the months have gone by, and we've talked about this before, in her latest comments, before the ones that we're going to talk about here today, she has seemed a little bit more open to returning as Wanda Maximoff, saying that she'd be down for a return to the MCU. And now, as she's making, I think, another promotional tour with another film, I think she's given her clearest indication that she would be returning, or she would be willing to return as Wanda Maximoff. Now, again, we don't do segments on X actor says, I'd love to come back in the MCU every single time because it would get exhausting. If every time Stan had said, I'd love to come back as Bucky, or Anthony Mackie had said, I'd love to come back as Cap or Falcon or whatever, back when he was Falcon. Or if Paul Rudd was asked every single time, would you want to come back as Ant-Man? The answer is, of course he would, right? So it's not not like we're going to cover this every single time, but I do think that this is all fitting into a larger narrative, a larger picture, where it seems like the tone of Elizabeth Olsen has been changing. And we'll read the quotes here in just a second about what she has to say. And I think that what some of the things she has to say about the MCU are really quite nice and quite touching. But we'll talk about that in just a second. But the other thing I wanted to say is that this is fitting into a narrative where certain actors, right after they exit the MCU, are kind of like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And I had a good run. Nothing bad about the MCU, just saying I had a good run. But then slowly their tone starts to change. And Robert Downey Jr. was the same. At first he was like, no, I'm done. Done with the MCU. And now he's back. And the tone had started to shift about a year before he was announced to be coming back as Doctor Doom. I think Chris Evans' tone is also softening just a little bit here, but we'll talk about that another day. So let's talk about Elizabeth Olsen's quotes here about returning as Wanda Maximoff, or just about the MCU in general. She says, quote, "Making the films are fun, goofy. It's ridiculous. We're grown people like children on a playground. We're flying, we're shooting things out of our hands, and it's a character that I've gotten to return to so many times after over 10 years. It's good to put her down, and then I miss her and I want her back. I jump at the opportunity to be in her shoes again." And then she has another quote here. Scrolling down in the article, scrolling down. Oh yes, here we go. "It's the consistency of a community in a job, which is hard to find. The insane camera movement, stunt work, and special effects, visual effects that are happening in real time. It's a lot of coordination. It's hundreds and thousands of people on set, and it's a powerful thing to be a part of all these people working towards one goal. The people doing the visual effects are artists. The soul, the spirit, the heart is fulfilled doing it. It does mean something. I care about the acting being great. Everyone does." I think it's great to hear that, honestly. At first, when I was reading those quotes, she was like, it's kind of ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, is she, because some of the actors who have done MCU things are like, it's, it is what it is. It's fine. It's whatever. But I think Elizabeth Olsen has been pretty clear and pretty transparent about the fact that, some of the things that you do as a Marvel actor is, acting on green screen and doing all those kinds of things. But also, there's a joy to it as well. And I love that she says that. Now, let's get to the meat of this quote, right? That's what we're here to talk about. She says, quote, "It's good to put her down, and then I miss her, and I want her back. I jump at the opportunity to be in her shoes again." So again, in a vacuum, right? Elizabeth Olsen says she'd want to come back as Wanda Maximoff. Does that mean anything in a vacuum? Not necessarily. But in the context of what she's been saying over the past few months, over the last year or so, I think it does mean something. We started out at a place where I believe she was saying things like, I had a good run and things like that, but no, I'm done. To, if there was an opportunity, I'd like to do it. To now, I jump at that opportunity to be in her shoes again. Does this mean she's already shot scenes as Wanda for Avengers Doomsday, or she knows she's going to be in Secret Wars? Not necessarily. Although, if she was going to be in Doomsday or Secret Wars, she would know by now. I think she'd definitely know by now. But does this lessen the chances of her coming back? And in fact, I think would increase the chance of her coming back? I certainly think that if she's saying these things and the Russos were having conversations with her and they were like, we actually do have an interesting role for a Scarlet Witch variant, because I've said all along, the variant from Earth 616 is dead. That's what I believe. That's what I believe the movie was saying. But obviously, in this world of the MCU and superhero movies and whatnot, of course that doesn't mean that she, Wanda Maximoff can't appear in some other form or fashion, right? So I think that if the Russos had conversations with her and she had expressed this enthusiasm, and she was like, yeah, I'd be down, then yeah, I think that increased her chances of coming back. So I personally think, I've said it before, I think that version is dead, but I also think that there is a pretty decent chance she's going to be coming back for Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. We'll have to see what that turns into. Guys, what do you make of her comments, Elizabeth Olsen's comments? Do you think that Scarlet Witch will be back for Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, I feel like we've gotten a pretty decent idea of where James Gunn's DCU is heading story-wise over the next few years, over the next few movies and shows. We got a pretty good indication of this in Peacemaker Season 2, and James Gunn has confirmed as much, saying that Salvation, and also Checkmate, the organization now comprised of Adebayo, Hardcore, Judah Master, Flurry Economos, all of the people, the main characters, the main good guys, if you will, from Peacemaker Season 2. Obviously, spoiler alert, sans Chris Smith as Peacemaker, who is stuck on Salvation. So those things are going to be very important for the DCU in the future. And a lot of speculation has come out of that because Salvation, as a concept in the DC universe, is based on a comic book run called Salvation Run, ironically, that James Gunn has said he's really enjoyed it, and it's clear that he's taken a lot of inspiration from the comic book run where Viola Davis, in the DCU, Viola Davis, but Amanda Waller takes a lot of the metahumans and says, look, they're just escaping from prison as fast as we can put them. They're in Arkham and Belle Reve, so let's put them in this alternate dimension where they're going to call it Salvation and see what happens there. So that's obviously inspiration for where the DCU is heading, and we'll see more of that in Man of Tomorrow, I'm sure. And Brainiac probably will be a part of that, just based on the teases that we've seen before. That being said, a lot of the speculation has turned to who the villain might be, or who the villains might be, given that Salvation Run is a big inspiration for the DCU. And one of the things about Salvation Run is that a lot of it deals with things like boom tubes and Darkseid. Darkseid being the Thanos equivalent, or you could say Thanos is the Darkseid equivalent in Marvel and DC. Basically the big guy. You saw him a little bit in Zack Snyder's Justice League. He is the villain who is looking for the anti-life equation in the DC comics and in the DC universe, and he's kind of big and kind of gray and looks like Thanos. So again, they're based on one another. I think Thanos was actually he came later after Darkseid, but they're kind of similar characters. Now they occupy similar spaces in each universe, I would say. Darkseid is a very big presence, and you don't use him lightly. I would think you don't use him as a character in a spin-off TV show, for example. I would think, at the very least. However, because of all this, there's been speculation that Darkseid is going to be the big villain of the DCU because Salvation Run has a lot to do with Darkseid and what he is after. But James Gunn, recently in an interview with a bunch of YouTube channels, including New Rockstars and Screen Crush, has confirmed that Darkseid is not going to be the big villain of the DCU. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't appear in future projects. In fact, I think that it is pretty possible that he would appear, almost like he does in Harley Quinn, which is obviously a very different show. But Harley Quinn is not necessarily, I mean, it could be, and it might be. But as far as I know, it's not necessarily interested in having Darkseid be a big villain, but he does show up here and there. And characters related to Darkseid and Boom Tubes and Parademons do show up in Harley Quinn. But obviously the last season was focused on Brainiac, and maybe that is a cue that James Gunn would take. Not consciously, perhaps, but, it's a similar path that James Gunn might be going on, where Darkseid could show up, potentially, but he might not be the main villain of the DCU. And that's confirmed now. Why I think this is a good thing, and actually James Gunn himself said so during this interview, is really just, it's twofold, and he said both of those things during the interview, but really the big reason is that it's been done. It just was done. Zack Snyder's big vision for the DCEU was Darkseid. That was his whole thing. That was the big linchpin. If you watch the Snyder Cut of Justice League, which, to be fair, I like a lot more than the theatrical cut, Darkseid is a big presence, and Zack Snyder has talked about his plans for the future movies, and how Darkseid, you saw the future visions in the Snyder Cut with the apocalypse and everything like that, and you saw a flashback scene with Darkseid getting the anti-life equation. So all of those things, right, all of those things were being set up in Zack Snyder's DCEU. It's not been done necessarily, but it was the original big plan for the previous iteration of DC. So I think that is a big reason, and James Gunn said it himself, that it's been done, and Zack Snyder just did that, basically. So I actually think, as when this speculation first started to happen, I was like, well, wait a second, though. Does James Gunn really want to just do what Zack Snyder was going to do anyways? That's going to make a lot of people angry. It's going to make a lot of people not confused, but maybe hesitant about what's happening with DC, and I think that it's smart. It's a smart thing to stray away from it. The secondary reason, though, that he brought up, and I think that this is also true, is that it doesn't really matter in the comics who came first, Darkseid or Thanos. In the movies, Thanos, obviously, made a much larger impression on most people than Darkseid ever will, because Thanos came first, and Thanos was part of two incredible pop culture events in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. In fact, a pop culture phenomenon that spanned over 10 years, arguably, in the Infinity Saga. So to do a character that is, let's be honest, and it is reductionist, it is generalization, but just on face value, to do a big bad villain that is pretty similar to Thanos, just, again, a surface level baseline, pretty similar to Thanos, I think is not the best idea for the DCU. So I'm actually pretty glad that James Gunn has confirmed that Darkseid is not going to be the big villain. Again, I would be shocked if we don't see him in some form or fashion, but I just don't think that that's the direction we're going in. Now, the question of who is the big villain, I have no idea. Could it be Brainiac? Sure, could be. It could be any number of characters, and I just, frankly, I don't have the expertise or the knowledge with DC Comics to know. And if you guys have thoughts, and if you guys have ideas of who this big villain might be, based on the DCU thus far and based on the comics, let me know in the comments. But guys, what do you think about the fact that Darkseid has been confirmed to not be the big villain of the DCU? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, let's wrap this one up, shall we? Let's talk about the season finale of Gen V Season 2, the spinoff to The Boys. This is your spoiler warning. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion of Gen V Season 2, Episode 7, or Episode 8 rather, and the entire season as a whole. We're going to wrap this thing up and talk about my thoughts on this finale, as well as just some thoughts on the season as a whole and where we go from here, heading into the next series in this universe, The Boys Season 5. So if you have not seen it, I've been vamping for just a little bit here. Make sure to save this segment, save this video, save the podcast for later, and come back once you have. Let us dive in. So, Gen V Season 2 has come to an end, and it has been a very interesting season thus far. It has been a season of, I'm not going to say ups and downs, because for the most part, I've actually quite enjoyed this season. I'm not going to say it's as inconsistent or as ebbing and flowing as Peacemaker Season 2, but I do think that there were some things in there where I was waiting for the entire season to wrap up so that I could fully understand where the scope of this season was heading and where the pacing was going to land. Because, look, I'm going to be honest, I think that for the most part, the season's pacing felt like it was intentionally leading the audience on to say, okay, there's going to be this really big payoff, there's going to be this really big thing coming, and then once this big thing happens, it's like, boom, the whole season's going to kind of come together. And I think Episode 7 was the biggest indication of what that could have been. And I think some people in the comments and some people online were like, oh, the twist was so obvious and I knew everything was coming, blah, blah, blah. I personally, it completely came out of nowhere, but I thought that as a good twist does, once you hear it, you're like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. That makes a lot of sense. We're talking, of course, about the whole Godolkin being, the one in control of Cypher, and Cypher being this guy named Doug. That I thought was really good. And a good twist, again, should not come absolutely out of nowhere. It should surprise you. It should take you off guard. But then, as you're looking at the clues, you're looking back on the season that you've seen thus far, you're like, oh, okay, I understand where this thing came from, and I understand how this thing happened, and where this led up to this. And so it all makes sense, right? And I thought it was a good twist. The problem with that twist, in my opinion, at least, with Episode 7, is that it came in Episode 7 out of an 8-episode season. And all of a sudden, you have one episode, and I feel like we've been saying this a lot with TV shows as of late over the past 5 or so years, of, oh, what a really interesting second-to-last episode. Wait a second. It's the second-to-last episode. There's only one episode left. What are we going to do? And the answer is, well, you're going to have to try to fit in a whole lot in the last episode because you just set up something really big that I feel like needs some time to breathe. Honestly, with a twist of that magnitude, I would have wanted to see maybe 2 or 3 more episodes and understanding who Godolkin was and what was going on there. And so when I clicked on the episode for the finale, I was like, okay, is this going to be an hour and a half? How long is this going to... It was 45 minutes. Okay, well, you can have really jam-packed 45-minute episodes. Let's just see what happens here. And I'm going to say this. I don't think Gen V's season finale for Season 2 was disappointing. In fact, I actually enjoyed it for the most part. I do think, though, that my fears and suspicions were confirmed. I do think that it felt like a disappointing finale for what was set up for Episode 7. Again, as a whole, and as an episode, it honestly, for the most part, as a conclusion to the season, I thought it was fine. I thought it was good, actually. I actually enjoyed it, and I thought some of the things that they did in there were pretty cool. But it just didn't feel satisfying for what was set up in the previous episode. And I really think now, looking at what happened here, again, spoiler discussion, right? I think that there are 2 ways you can go about this with Godolkin after what you set up in Episode 7, right? One way you can go is that he is not going to die at the end of Season 2 of Gen V. Spoiler alert, that's not what happened. But that's one option where he's not going to die, and he's going to be a very big part of whatever happens next in The Boys season 5. And to the show's credit, they actually made it seem like that was kind of what was going to happen for most of the episode. For most of the episode, you're kind of like, oh, is he actually going to be a really big problem for Homelander in The Boys season 5? How is that going to work out? We will return to the whole Boys Gen V connection conundrum, I will say, at the end of this segment. But that's one possibility, right? He is like Godolkin, is going to kind of tease out his powers at the end of this season, but he's going to be a real problem in The Boys season 5, which might have been disappointing in its own right in certain ways, but still was an option that could have happened. But the second option, and the option that they ended up going with, is that, well, you're just going to kill Godolkin at the end of this season. And look, I think the way that you got there was fine. It was interesting, right? The whole, oh, thanks for the level up, and then Marie kills Godolkin, and that's for Andre, and look, it's very touching, and it's emotional because that is sort of the closure that a lot of the characters were looking for with Andre as a character. Although I will say, looking back at the season as a whole, while I think that towards the beginning there were a lot of strong connections and a lot of strong bits of writing around the really tragic passing of Chance Perdomo, who played Andre in season 1. The actor passed away between first and second season, so I thought that the beginning of this season really did a good job of touching on it and weaving it into the story. As the season went along, I couldn't help but think that the writing just kind of resorted to this whole, for Andre, this is for Andre, I'm doing this for Andre, and it just kind of felt like the same thing written into the show. Again, I do not envy the writers. It was a terrible position to be in, obviously, as human beings, emotionally, to lose somebody that they cared about like that, and then of course on a written level as well. So I don't envy them, but I'm just pointing out that I think, as we get to the end of the season, episode 8, where Emma is like, Andre would have been so proud of you and all that kind of stuff, to Polarity, it's like, yeah, I think that's true. I just feel like the characters had just been saying it more so than really diving deep into that. That's a whole aside, though. But yeah, I think that the whole, Marie leveling up and becoming more powerful through Godolkin, it's like, yeah, that's clearly what the intent was there. And I think that each character had a really interesting... some interesting things to do in this season that made them more rich, but I feel like it was less of a real full-fleshed character arc for them in this season, in the second season, right? Because even though we know them as characters now, you still want them to have a full-fledged character arc within the season itself. I feel like it was more of just each character took a couple steps forward in interesting directions, and that was about it, instead of having another complete arc. To me, that's what makes Gen V Season 1 just better, in my opinion, than Gen V Season 2, is because you have established characters who, yeah, the advantage of Gen V Season 1, but also the challenge, honestly, is you get to take these characters from the ground level and build them up. And in that respect, in that regard, these characters felt very well realized by the time you get to the end of Season 1, and you have a very definitive set of character arcs and traits for these characters. In this season, Marie obviously is the one who levels up, right, as a person, and she meets her sister again, and that's the emotional tie. And she makes some kind of dumb decisions. And again, I'm not saying that is very intentional on the writer's part, that she becomes brash and she becomes bold and more assured in her powers, and sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. But that's kind of the character that we saw towards the end of the season, right? I think characters like Kate, I think that it was an interesting thing to have a redemption arc for her. It just felt like it was kind of put on the back burner in certain elements. Speaking of put on the back burner, Sam had a nice, I think a nice mini arc within one of the episodes with his mom and his dad, but really didn't have a whole lot to do in this season, and had a little bit of a love triangle arc that kind of got abandoned towards the end of the season. So yeah, I mean, some of the characters, again, Jordan, I think Jordan had some very interesting things to do towards the beginning of the season, but as the season went on, they really kind of were relegated to the background, and then were relegated to just being Marie's love interest, and I think that was a little disappointing for me. So, again, I think that this show this season had its good moments, and I think for the most part, if you watch from beginning to end, things make sense, things line up. I think the twist makes sense, and it's satisfying to me, at least, but maybe not for all of you. To me, it totally makes sense, and I think it's a good one. But I think that there are some things in here where, as you go into this last episode, I mean, you're starting to meld into the boys' universe, right? As you head into this last episode, and I know that Eric Kripke, wow, that is a tongue twister, has said that you don't need to watch The Boys to understand Gen V, and that's probably true. At the same time, though, Sister Sage, wow, these tongue twisters, man. Sister Sage, being in the series as much as she is, and then referring to Homelander and Odessa and things like that, felt like it was starting to veer off onto the lane of, okay, we're really setting up the boys now. as we got on later in the season. But again, I think that the fight with Godolkin and the students, where he was controlling them against Marie, that was interesting, and I think that was a useful power set to see on screen as well. I really liked Ethan Slater. I had totally forgotten that he was in Wicked, by the way, so we're going to see him probably in Wicked Part 2. Totally forgot about that. But I thought he gave a good performance as Godolkin, and I would have liked to have seen how he talked to Homelander, considering he was one of the originals, right? He took the same compound V as Soldier Boy and Stormfront, so that is an interesting thing there. I'm not as, immersed in the boys' lore to remember how he intersects with Vought himself and where all the stuff comes from. So, I'm going to have to figure that all out. But anyways, I think that stuff is interesting, which is why I'm a little disappointed that we don't get to see any extension of that. But again, I thought it was a decent season finale. I just think that they tried to do a little too much, and they're trying to connect some dots here as we head into the final season of The Boys. I do think that this is not going to be a quote-unquote permanent thing, because Eric Kripke has said he's going to, as long as Amazon greenlights it, he's going to do a season 3 of The Boys, or of Gen V rather. So I would like to see just a fresh slate for these characters, not having to deal with the Homelander thing of it all and all that kind of stuff. But we'll have to see where that goes from here. But of course, I've been talking about this all season long. We do have to discuss The Boys, because this season finale has left me both intrigued and conflicted. I think it is a nice in the sense of it is a satisfying way to end the season, having this group of characters really coalesce now and come together to form their own little resistance band. I think that makes total sense, and I think that is a very compelling way to have these characters where they've always been split up and they've always had their differences, but now they're on a united front, right? They are now really part of this mini resistance that's going on. Then you see the lights flicker at the end of the season, and you see Annie, you see Starlight, and then you see A-Train, and it's about as explicit as you could possibly get. She says something like, "You want to join the resistance," or something like that, and it's like, oh, okay, so that is about as explicit as it gets. And I read an interview with Kripke where he was talking about the connections between The Boys and Gen V, and he was saying, no, we've always operated under the principle that you do not need to watch one to know the other, but at the same time, obviously the characters from Gen V are going to have a part to play in The Boys Season 5, so that is confirmed, while also, obviously, The Boys Season 5 being about the boys, so about Huey and Kimiko and Frenchie and MM and all those characters, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think that it kind of undercut a lot of what was going on with the finale to have Starlight just show up and be like, "Hey, welcome to the Resistance." It's like, oh, whoa, okay, so this is really just boy setup now at the end, which I don't mind in a vacuum, right? I'm excited to see these characters again. I think it almost shattered the suspension of disbelief for me to be like, yeah, this is, Gen V, and I'm really enjoying Gen V. And then you have the boys just show up, and you have A-Train show up, which is cool, right? I actually, honestly, it's been such a long time since I've watched The Boys Season 4. Totally forgot about A-Train being a part of this resistance now. So that was a good reminder of that. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see these characters again, but I also I'm wondering where the lines are blurring and where they're not blurring, and how these characters are going to factor in. Like in The Boys Season 5, if Eric Kripke really sticks to what he's been saying, then is it going to be a situation where, Huey, go talk to the other resistance group, and he goes and talks to Marie, and he's like, "Hey, I have a mission for you," and there's a little side quest going on, which again, I'm sure if you haven't seen The Boys or haven't seen Gen V, it'll be fine. You'll understand at a base level, but you won't have any attachment to these characters. So I wonder what that's going to look like. At the end of the day, while I'm not disappointed by Gen V Season 2, I'm honestly not. It may seem like I am, and I'm pointing out things that I think are a little confusing or I'm questioning heading into The Boys Season 5. I actually enjoyed this season, but I also find myself in this position where it's okay that it's this way. I don't think it's nearly as close to Season 1 as I would have hoped. I liked Season 1 actually quite a bit, because I do think it was a breath of fresh air as we were heading into The Boys Season 3 and 4. I think it was between 3 and 4, because I do think that while I enjoy 3 and 4, I think that those seasons were really getting into the crazy territory, and Homelander was kind of going crazy, and it was building up the tension, right? It was building up the stakes, and it was kind of getting really big. That I liked how Gen V kind of shrunk back the stakes a little bit and just put people in schools and was talking about students and things like that. So I was intrigued about that, and I really like that. But again, I enjoyed this season, but I'm very curious, I think, more so than anything else, to see how all these things are going to start to tie together as we head into season 5 of The Boys. So guys, what did you think about Gen V season 2 episode 8, the finale? What did you think about the season as a whole? And are you more or less excited now to know that these characters from Gen V are going to show up in The Boys season 5? And what do you think their role is going to be? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so let's talk about this new Star Wars movie that could have been The Hunt for Ben Solo. And we got to back up here, because when I first heard that title, I was like, what? Is there going to be a new Star Wars movie? And the answer is no, not really. But there almost was. Because at first you read the title, The Hunt for Ben Solo, and you're like, oh, maybe a prequel, maybe before The Last Jedi, or before the training sequences that were shown in The Last Jedi, maybe, right? No, this was going to be post Rise of Skywalker. There are so many layers to this, and Adam Driver has recently discussed all of them. So I wanted to really dive in here and talk about all the different things and then give my thoughts on this scrapped, right? Because this movie is not happening anymore. This scrapped Star Wars movie called The Hunt for Ben Solo. So Adam Driver was giving an interview recently. He talked a lot about Star Wars, and he said that now that this project is officially dead, he can talk about it to the public. So let's go through his comments here. I'm reading from Entertainment Weekly, and then we'll talk about it on the other side, because I have a lot of thoughts on this. So when talking about just his thoughts on Star Wars, he said, quote, "I always was interested in doing another Star Wars. I had been talking about doing another one since 2021. Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm, had reached out. I always said, with a great director and a great story, I'd be there in a second. I love that character and love playing him." Which is great to hear, right? Because I think that one of the actors who really came out of it unscathed, to be quite honest with you. Unscathed meaning there was a lot of backlash for a lot of different characters. And it's not all the characters' fault, it's not all the actors' fault, it's not all the directors' faults. But I think that really, universally, people agree that Adam Driver gave it his all. And he, I think, much like how Ewan McGregor came out of the prequels, pretty much unscathed, despite the fact that the prequels were generally not well received, I think Adam Driver was pretty similar. So it's great to see, based on the fact that maybe he, one might have thought he didn't have a great time, but no, he really likes the character. He says here, then he was asked about another project, the project that they were pitching, and he says, quote, "It was called The Hunt for Ben Solo, and it was really cool. But it is no more, so I can finally talk about it. We presented the script to Lucasfilm. They loved the idea. They totally understood our angle and why we were doing it. We took it to Bob Iger and Alan Bergman, I think, and they said, no, those are the heads of Disney. They didn't see how Ben Solo was alive, and that was that." Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts about this, because I think on the one hand, right, people might be going, well, wait a second, why did the Disney executives kill this idea? It could have been a great idea, blah, 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 blah. There's going to be people on that side of the aisle. There's going to be people on the other side of the aisle of, what a stupid idea anyways, and why would Kylo Ren be alive? You saw him disappear in the Rise of Skywalker, and he died, and he gave up his life force to whatever save Rey, and it's going to be another case of, oh, somehow Ben Solo returns, right? There are going to be people on both sides of the aisle. And I just want to point out too, this movie isn't happening anyway, so it's all speculation. It's not going to happen. We can have fun debates and fun discussions about whether or not the movie would have been good, would have been fun, would have made sense, but at the end of the day, let's not get too heated. The movie's not happening. So I just want to put that out there. Here's the thing. Generally speaking, I actually, when I first read this news, right, the idea of a sequel film taking place after Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker called The Hunt for Ben Solo, I actually found myself aligning with Disney and saying, what a ridiculous idea, because how in the world is Ben Solo alive? How are you going to make this movie without doing another Episode 9 Palpatine, somehow Emperor Palpatine returned? How is that going to happen? There's going to have to be some really weird retconning, I think, personally, to even make this movie possible. And just the backlash of that alone, I don't even know is worth making the movie, even if the movie's great. So on that level, I was like, yeah, I get it. If I was presented with this idea, I would have been like, wait, what? How is this even happening? That all being said, and also, I should point out for more context, it wasn't discussed in this Entertainment Weekly article, but it was discussed in other articles as well. There was a whole treatment for this film written. I think that there was even a script written. I want to say Steven Soderbergh, a very accomplished filmmaker in his own right, I think either wrote the treatment or wrote the script for it. So it's not like this was just something that Adam Driver was tossing around one day and Kathleen Kennedy was like, hey, wouldn't that be fun? This had real legs under it. It had a treatment at the very least, if not a full script for this movie. So there was a fully fleshed out idea for The Hunt for Ben Solo, right? This is not like some half-baked idea that went to Disney and they were like, no, that's dumb. Just to put that out there, just to be clear, right? This really could have happened. This movie could have happened if Disney had given it a green light. So again, from the Disney perspective, yeah, I don't understand. How is Kylo Ren alive? How does that make sense? And I think in general, right? If any, let's just say generic actor, generic writer comes up to Disney and they're like, hey, we have this great idea for reviving Ben Solo. What do you think about this movie called The Hunt for Ben Solo? In general, I think that is the end of discussion. How do you make this movie? Especially given the backlash of the sequel trilogy. I mean, they're making another Rey movie, to be clear. So, maybe that's inconsistent, but I just don't see how this movie could happen. But, and we're never going to know, Adam Driver seems super thrilled about the script, super thrilled about the idea, and Adam Driver is an Oscar caliber actor. He's not just doing things for the sake of doing things. He is in a position in Hollywood to do what he wants to do. He is an incredible actor in his own right. And again, I just don't think he's not doing Star Wars for a paycheck. I don't think. I mean, I'm sure the money's good, but he's not just doing Star Wars for the paycheck, is my presumption. I have to believe if there really was a good idea, if there was a really solid, well thought out, good idea that Steven Soderbergh and Adam Driver pitched to Disney, I would hope, my hope, and we're just never going to know unless Bob Iger comes out and says it himself and reveals what this entire plot was, or if Adam Driver reveals what the entire plot was. We're not going to know what the rationale was, what the story actually was. My hope is that Bob Iger and Alan Bergman did not just turn down the script purely on the basis of Kylo Ren can't possibly be alive anymore, and that's the only rationale. Because while it is, in my eyes, pretty fair to think that and to wonder how are you going to make this movie, if Adam Driver and Steven Soderbergh actually brought forward a really compelling reason and a really compelling script, then they should have made the movie. I think that's it. They should have made the movie. And again, I'm not a marketing executive. I'm not a budget expert. I don't know all the financials and stuff like that. So given all that, just creatively, if there was an actual good reason, then I would have hoped Bob Iger and Alan Bergman left the door open wide enough to allow for that possibility, but ultimately came to the decision that no, this is not a good idea in general. Because again, if they were just using the rationale of we just can't see how this is possible, and that's it, they just didn't give the idea the time of day, I'm disappointed. Maybe the movie would have been a disaster, but maybe the movie could have been really, really, really good, right? We're not going to know. We're just never going to know. But I think there are plenty of examples where you look at a movie conceptually and you go, why are you making this movie? And it's turned out great. I've said it before, right? Toy Story 4, I thought was a ludicrous idea. Why are we doing this? For what reason? You ended the trilogy in such a beautiful fashion. Somebody at Disney and Pixar pitched Toy Story 4. And they said, I have a good idea for this. And if an executive at Disney said, no, we're done. We're not doing it anymore. We're going to get so much backlash. We're done. Then the movie would have never come out. And I thought Toy Story 4 was great. And guess what? It made $1 billion. So just being closed-minded to ideas just on a pure principle basis is not, I'm talking about creatively, right? Specifically creatively, is not always the best idea. So I don't know what this movie would have been like. For all I know, if Adam Driver comes out with the script tomorrow and posts it online and I read it and I'm like, oh no, this really should not have been made, then that's that. But I hope that Bob Iger and Alan Bergman and the powers that be at Disney didn't just shut down a movie that could have been really, really great. We're not going to know, but that is my hope. Guys, what do you make of all this? The Hunt for Ben Solo could have been a Star Wars movie that was probably going to come out in the next couple of years. That would have been a really interesting alternative universe. What do you think about this idea? And what do you think about all the decisions that went into not making this movie? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 101 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us as always. Thank you again. It's so exciting, guys. I'm excited. We're heading towards the end of the year. Holidays are coming up. I'm thrilled. It's going to be a fun time. So If you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like if you could. That would mean a whole lot to me as we are on the road to 2,000 subscribers. And if you are interested in the audio-only platform, Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts, that is where we are. Thank you all so much again for joining us on the Access Blockbusters pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.